My friends, we're witnessing the biggest show of force of the US military in the Caribbean in the last 30 years. Warships, amphibious assault ships, fighter aircraft, and thousands of Marines on the foot of war. Is the United States actually going to invade Venezuela? Or are we going to witness Operation Venezuelan Freedom? No! Officially, the reason behind the deployment of US military forces is a counter-narcotics operation, which mostly involves sniping fishing boats and speedboats using drones. But let's be honest, the US invaded Latin American countries for much less than that. America, fuck yeah! Actually, you don't even have to watch the rest of the video. There are only 3 reasons why the US is really interested in Venezuela. Oil. Lots of oil, as in country with the biggest oil reserves in the world. Oh, hold up Exxon, put that down. Don't get too excited, because there's more. Number 2, a dictator and a serious lack of freedom. Can you hear the eagles already? And number 3, Venezuela happens to be the country with the second most Miss Universe titles. That will become very important after Venezuela is invaded. Jokes aside, this US operation leads to many questions. What is the real nature of drug trafficking in Venezuela? Does it make sense to use military force for what's essentially a counter-narcotics police operation? Is this the real reason behind Trump's gunboat diplomacy? Or is it just a pretext for an all-out invasion? And despite this massive buildup of US forces in the Caribbean, would this be enough to actually invade Venezuela? Is Venezuela finally going to fight against the imperialismo norteamericano?
Ham of Venezuela. Donald Trump, hands of Venezuela.
Or are they just going to pull down the pants and accept the hits? This is what we're going to explore in this video. Hold on, I wanted to tell you something about Joe Rogan. Oh yeah, Joe Rogan went to Mexico and used stem cells to treat a serious injury.
I had a full-length rotator cuff tear, and the UFC gave me a doctor in Los Angeles, and he looks at my MRI and goes, "You're gonna need surgery." I go, 100%? He goes, "I don't know how you're using it now. It's a matter of time. You're gonna need surgery, so it might be better to do it now." So I got it shot up with stem cells. And this was the early days of stem cells in America where you could get away with more. That you gotta go to Mexico now again.
Now, most stem cell therapies are illegal in the US. So that's why I wanted to tell you about today's sponsor, Black Forest Supplements. Did you know that there was a natural way to support your own stem cell activity? And it comes from high flavanol cocoa. Harvard scientist Dr. William Lee actually backed this up. Check it out.
So, studies have been done to show that the flavanols in cocoa stimulate stem cells to come out of your bone marrow like bees in a beehive in your bloodstream, and they go out and they find wherever it needs to be repaired. If it's in your heart, they'll fix it.
That's right, dark chocolate. But here's the thing. Flavanols are the good things found in cocoa beans, but they're usually destroyed during the chocolate making process. That's where Black Forest Supplements comes in. They've created the first ever high flavanol cocoa powder, packed with everything your body actually needs, and it's only 20 calories. This isn't regular cocoa, it's stem cell fuel. I mix it with my coffee or my protein shakes and it tastes amazing. If you feel old, slow, or just off, lazy stem cells might be why. But this, it flips the switch. Over 100% increase in stem cell circulation. Black Forest Supplements offers you an amazing deal. Buy one, get one. But for 48 hours only. So don't hesitate, link is in the description below or in the pinned comment. Don't miss it! Before talking about the US military buildup against Venezuela, in Montreal fashion we'll have to take a quick detour, because there's a deeper backstory to these tensions between the US and Venezuela, one that you may not be aware of. We can go far back in time, talk about the independence of Venezuela, the rise of Chavez, then tie this with the Monroe Doctrine, and ultimately try to explain why I have to pay $25 for some cachapa. Put simply, Trump has always been very vocal against Venezuela's dictator, Nicolas Maduro.
The dictator Maduro is a Cuban puppet.
But Maduro's grip on tyranny will be smashed and broken.
But he needed a pretext, an excuse to invade. And the root cause of the current crisis started in late 2023. Here, The Atlantic wrote, "Is Venezuela serious about invading Guyana? You see, to boost his popularity, Venezuelan president for life Maduro claimed sovereignty over Guyana's Essequibo region, which would effectively mean annexing 2/3 of Guyana. I won't go into details, but it's a territorial dispute that dates back to the 1800s, and one that, of course, involves the British.
Yeah, baby.
That's how Venezuela decided to organize a referendum to know if its people was ready to annex Guyana's Essequibo region. Essentially, one of the questions was, do you agree with updating all Venezuelan maps and documents to include Guyana Essequibo as national territory? I'm pretty sure this referendum should have been the other way around, asking the people of Essequibo if they want to be part of Venezuela. But anyway, in late 2023, Venezuelans voted yes at 95%. All this could have been a funny joke. But thing is, these were not just empty words. In October 2023, the first reports emerged of Venezuelan military construction, including upgrades to bases like Punta Barima, 75 kilometers from the Guyanese border. In this video, we can hear the commander say that they will upgrade the location from a Tier 2 Coast Guard outpost to a main naval base. The Venezuelan Navy could deploy its Iranian PACAP 3 class missile boats armed with Kausar and Nasser anti-ship missiles. But those are not the only Iranian weapons Venezuela has acquired. Venezuela's armed forces also use the Arpia 001, a direct derivative of the Mohajer 2, which is being assembled right inside Venezuela. There's also the Ansu 100 and 200, which is an armed version of the Arpia, and that is capable of launching Iranian Qaem-guided munitions. There's also the Zamora V1, a Shahid 136 inspired loitering munition that uses GPS and that is armed with RPG-7-like warheads with a range of 50 to 100 kilometers. Allegedly, it's also one of Venezuela's new drone units that have been credited with detecting Operation Gideon, a failed 2020 incursion to capture Maduro by Venezuelan exiles and US veterans. But that's not all, because shortly after, Venezuela also reinforced its outpost on the remote Anacoco Island sitting on the Cuyuni River right at the border with Guyana. No, actually, this is a lie, because Anacoco Island is actually located inside Guyana. You see, in 1966, only 5 months after Guyana gained independence, Venezuelan troops occupied this island and maintained control over it ever since. Of course, Guyana doesn't have the military means to restore its sovereignty. Let's just say their military consists of just over 3,000 personnel. Think of it as a beefed-up police force. They have to secure an area the size of Florida. As you can see on this satellite image from Anacoco Island, an airstrip was being built, as well as a road leading north through Venezuela. By the 25th of November, a PZL Mielec M28 Skytruck landed on the strip. Although construction for a military base started, the main logistical deadlock was the Cuyuni River. All building materials had to be ferried across. There's a plot twist at the end of the video, and this base on Anacoco Island might serve a very specific purpose. Suddenly, in December 2023, The Guardian reported, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has ordered more than 5,600 military personnel to participate in defensive exercises after the UK deployed a warship to waters off the coast of Guyana in a show of support for the former British colony. That's how the Royal Navy's HMS Trent patrol vessel was sent to the Caribbean. Whoa, everybody's shaking, everybody's scared. It's like helping your friends move apartments when you have a plaster cast on your arm. Your presence is a nice gesture, but it won't make a difference. Venezuela's military base on Anacoco Island was emerging out of the jungle. In the meantime, an increasing number of Venezuelan troops were deploying in that area, mostly using helicopters. By April 2024, a C-130 Hercules took off from the newly upgraded airstrip, and 1 month later, the pontoon crossing over the Cuyuni River was opened. An impressive feat given how deep in the jungle the site is located in. This allowed an entire infantry company, trucks, and multiple armored vehicles to reach Anacoco Island. And by December 2024, the supply bridge was completed, with a reported max tonnage of 40 tons, more than enough for the majority of Venezuelan trucks and armored vehicles to go through. On January 10th, 2025, Nicolas Maduro was inaugurated for his third presidential term. Despite Maduro's party losing in every district, looks totally legit. Like Papa Joseph said, it's not the people that vote who count, it's the people who count the votes. The US had enough of this masquerade and announced a $25 million reward for information leading to Maduro's arrest. And in response to that, Nicolas Maduro calls for Puerto Rico invasion to liberate the island from the US. Yeah, very bold. Not something I would recommend with the current administration, but very bold.
Should our enemies choose foolishly to challenge us, they will be crushed.
And then on the 18th of February, Guyanese troops bringing supplies aboard a motor-powered canoe got ambushed by two wooden boats. Armed men from neighboring Venezuela opened fire and injured 6 Guyanese soldiers. Coincidence, this happened only 80 kilometers east of Anacoco Island. But then everybody got back to their senses, people shook hands, peace is back. No! 2 weeks later, on March 1st, 2025, a Venezuelan warship entered Guyana's exclusive economic zone, approached an ExxonMobil oil facility, and demanded information from its crew. As if they owned the place, you know? Here we can see the Venezuelan patrol vessel Guayqueri operating right next to the offshore facility. This territorial dispute between Venezuela and Guyana exacerbated tensions with the United States. And that's how Trump's administration found the perfect pretext for an intervention. Here from the Miami Herald, we can read, US warns Maduro of consequences following incursion of Venezuelan warships into Guyana. In response, at the end of March, Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Guyana, signing a security agreement for intelligence sharing and military cooperation. It's in this very precise context that on the 25th of July, the Venezuelan Cartel de los Soles was designated a terrorist organization. And then, on the 7th of August, US offers $50 million reward for arrest of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. The next day, the New York Times reported, President Trump has secretly signed a directive to the Pentagon to begin using military force against certain Latin American drug cartels that his administration has deemed terrorist organizations. The Cartel of the Suns is a term to describe a loose network of Venezuelan high military ranking officers accused of facilitating cocaine shipments from Colombia through Venezuela and then to the rest of the world. The Cartel de los Soles emerged in the 1990s and derives its name from the sun insignia worn on the epaulets of Venezuelan Army Brigade and Division commanders. However, the Cartel of the Suns has no defined command structure. Its hierarchy is very murky. It's more like a state-sponsored syndicate enabled by Maduro's regime. On Inside Crime, we can read, military and political officials profit by working with drug traffickers. Officials are not necessarily directly involved with drug shipments, though in certain cases military vehicles may be used to move drugs. More often, officials use their positions to protect traffickers from arrest and ensure that shipments pass through a territory. A fancy way of saying corrupt government officials. The actual distribution is carried by other cartels like the Venezuelan Tren de Aragua or even the ELN, the Ejército de Liberación Nacional, or National Liberation Army, a Marxist narco-insurgent group from Colombia. It's important to note that for many years now, Venezuela is offering sanctuary for this Colombian cartel whose 6,000 fighters are actively combating the Colombian army in the Catatumbo region bordering Venezuela. The ELN keeps launching offensives into Colombia, and when the Colombian military counterattacks, ELN units withdraw to the safety of Venezuelan territory. However, we cannot say that the Maduro regime is allied to these cartels. It's more like frenemies. Venezuelan military officials take their cut. But when these cartels become too powerful, Venezuelan security forces intervene with great force to show them who's boss. So, 1 week after Trump's directive, on the 14th of August, the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group departed from Norfolk, Virginia towards the Caribbean Sea. It consisted of the amphibious assault ship USS Iwo Jima, along with the amphibious transport docks USS Fort Lauderdale and USS San Antonio. The flotilla carried 4,500 personnel, including the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit with its 2,200 Marines. Right off the bat, I don't understand how 2,000 Marines can defeat Venezuela's 100,000 soldiers. This is a Bay of Pigs type of situation you don't want to step into. It's especially ridiculous considering 27,000 US personnel were deployed against tiny Panama in 1989. By the 2nd of September, we learned that the flotilla was augmented by Arleigh Burke-class destroyers USS Sampson and USS Gravely, as well as Independence-class littoral combat ship USS Minneapolis-St. Paul, plus the USS Newport News attack submarine. At the same time, all these warships present the perfect setup for some Gulf of Tonkin-like incident to happen, where the US is like, come on, I dare you, hit me right there, you don't have the balls to hit me. But then nothing happened. So, on the 2nd of September, the first video was released of a US drone strike on a drug trafficking vessel that departed from Venezuela. Write this down! This is brilliant! Allegedly, 11 people on board accused of belonging to the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua were KIA. If Trump's operation was a big bluff, then it has already caused the death of almost a dozen people. 2 days later, 2 Venezuelan F-16 fighter jets flew over the destroyer USS Jason Dunham while in international waters. Wow, using US weapons against US warships. Very bold. There was even this exclusive footage of one of these 2 Venezuelan F-16s flying right over a US warship. Except this is fake news. It's actually old footage from an F-16 flying over a Venezuelan Guayqueri-class patrol boat. In total, the Venezuelan Air Force maintains a combat aircraft inventory comprising 13 F-16AB Fighting Falcons and 21 Russian Su-30 Mk2 Flanker G multi-role fighters. As you can imagine, the actual number of operational aircraft is probably much lower. In response to this escalation, on the 5th of September, the US deployed 10 F-35 jets to Puerto Rico. For your information, the USS Iwo Jima deployed to the Caribbean Sea can also launch F-35Bs. That same day, US Marines executed amphibious landing drills in Puerto Rico. Multiple landing craft air cushions were deployed, offloading LA-V-25 armored reconnaissance vehicles to establish a beachhead. Additionally, V-22 Ospreys provided airlift and close air support. And that's how a lot of US military personnel gathered in Puerto Rico. I guess GG well played, they just missed Bad Bunny's residency. 24 hours later, on the 6th of September, the Venezuelans rolled out the Iranian-made attack boats we talked about earlier, probably to shield them from US airstrikes. But I guess it's GG well played for all the other Venezuelan warships. On the 7th of September, President Trump was asked if he was considering attacking Venezuelan cartels directly inside Venezuela. He responded with,
What are you going to find out? You're going to find out.
That same day, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, US Secretary of War, arrived with the VM-22B Osprey on the USS Iwo Jima for a photo op, and to emphasize that the operation was not simple training, but a real-world exercise on the front lines. The next day, 4 of the 12 US Air Force V-22 Ospreys were spotted flying over San Juan, Puerto Rico. On the 13th of September, a tuna fishing vessel was boarded and searched by a US Navy Visit Board Search and Seizure team from the USS Jason Dunham in international waters. The 9 fishermen aboard were detained by the Americans for 8 hours, until they were released under escort of the Venezuelan Navy. Once again, US and Venezuelan forces met face to face, but fortunately no incident happened. No, get it right, YouTuber, it's unfortunately no incident happened. It's also important to understand that this ongoing tension enables Maduro to leverage the perceived threat of a foreign invasion to rally the entire population under the flag, and this despite strong opposition. Thousands upon thousands of civilians are currently signing up into Venezuela's Bolivarian militia and undergoing basic military training. 2 days later, the US military destroyed a second vessel with alleged Venezuelan drug traffickers. Venezuela's defense minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez warned Guyana and Trinidad against hosting American troops. And the next day, he stated that every night, US intelligence aircraft fly near Venezuela to map out their positions. they better take a quick crash course in Maskerovka, or they're gonna get wrecked during the final exam. On the 19th of September, President Trump announced that a third vessel was destroyed with 3 narcos on board. At this rate, might as well just destroy all the fishing villages in Venezuela. That's a great idea. Thank you, YouTuber. And of course, the US Special Forces ghost ship MV Ocean Trader was also spotted off the coast of Venezuela. That's when Venezuela announced a military exercise called Operación Caribe Soberano 200, or Operation Sovereign Caribbean 200. It took place on an inhabited island called Orchila, located 160 kilometers northeast from Caracas. Here we can see Venezuela's Minister of Defense next to a map of that Orchila island. During the exercise, Venezuelan troops test-fired Igla man-portable surface-to-air missiles, and allegedly the exercise involved 12 warships, 22 aircraft, 2,500 troops, and dozens of Chinese-made armored vehicles. That's strange. It's more or less the size of the US task force. Could it be that... No, they wouldn't dare. And also, I don't understand why Venezuelan troops would rehearse amphibious landings and beachhead assaults when it's obvious they'll be on the defensive. It's as if in May 1944, German troops stationed in Normandy were training for an amphibious invasion of England. Once again, very bold, but not realistic. On the 26th of September, Maduro said many South American leaders sent him cards to support him, and that if the Americans touch Venezuela, they touch us all. And on the 30th, wearing the same outfit I wore at my graduation, he said, I can swear to you that Venezuela will be neither anyone's backyard nor anyone's colony. Very patriotic for sure, but as a reminder, since Maduro came to power in 2013, 8 million Venezuelans left the country, 25% of the population. It's not a surprise that all the research centers and articles trash-talking Maduro come from Miami, Venezuela's unofficial offshore colony. Anyway, thanks to the entire planet being chronically glued to their phones, we know that on the 2nd of October, the Venezuelan military redeployed some of its S-125 Pechora 2M air defense systems along the Central Regional Highway. Meanwhile, a Russian-made Buick M2E was also spotted near La Carlota airport. They know that their main enemy will probably be the Marine Corps' F-35B Lightning II's Fighter Attack Squadron 225 stationed in Puerto Rico. At the same time, the 22nd MEU staged another beach landing exercise in Arroyo, Puerto Rico. And then, on the 3rd of October, a 4th narco boat was sunk by the US military. At that time, according to declassified material, a reported 27 Venezuelan gang members were KIA due to US airstrikes in the South Caribbean.
But we did another one last night. Now we just can't find any. You know, it's the old story. We're so good at it that there are no boats. In fact, even fishing boats, nobody wants to go into the water anymore. Sorry to tell you that.
4 days later, the New York Times reported Trump calls off diplomatic outreach to Venezuela, where they stated, taken with the decision to call off diplomacy, the notice appeared to be a signal that the United States planned to escalate the military operations. On the 10th of October, feeling that an invasion from the evil North American imperialists was imminent, Venezuela asked the UN Security Council for an emergency session over US military actions in the Caribbean. But the US didn't care. 14th of October, a 5th narco vessel was sunk, adding another 6 fatalities to the total. The next day, Trump was asked if he was considering airstrikes.
Well, I don't want to tell you exactly, but we are certainly looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control.
It's always this, yes, we're gonna do it, but not really. Typical Gemini, if you ask me. No, actually, I don't know. It's my sister's geopolitical analysis. And coincidentally, that same day, 2 B-52 strategic bombers were spotted operating over the Caribbean Sea just north of Venezuela. In response, Venezuelan F-16s were on high alert. Later on the 15th, the New York Times reported that the Trump administration had secretly authorized potentially lethal covert operations by the CIA in Venezuela. Oh yeah, you mean like 5 years ago? And this is where we're at right now. By mid-October 2025, the Pentagon had significantly expanded its operations in the Caribbean, adding thousands more personnel for air support, logistics, and special operations. The total now includes 5,000 as part of the naval forces and another 5,000 ashore in Puerto Rico, thus bringing the regional total to approximately 10,000 troops. And all of a sudden, anti-imperialist Maduro now seeks peace and says no to war in the Caribbean. Militarily speaking, in early October, the CIS believed the US military had too few Marines, naval, and air assets to carry out an all-out invasion of Venezuela. And I agree, 2,200 Marines to take Caracas is completely ridiculous. The US military would need at least 50,000 troops, at least. And for information, this is what Caracas looks like. It doesn't even sit along the coast, but it's separated from the sea by this massive mountain chain. Even if US forces land troops here, they will have to use small mountain roads and tunnels to enter Caracas, a city home to 3 million people. In my opinion, a frontal assault against Caracas seems unlikely. The better plan would be to land 70 kilometers east of the capital in Higuerote. There the terrain is completely flat and open, and thus more suitable for an amphibious operation. But that's only if the US intends to launch a ground invasion. And who knows, perhaps just like the Assad regime, Maduro's regime is rotten from the inside, and all you need to do is kick it down. Or it could turn like a Bay of Pigs 2.0 against tens of thousands of militiamen. Anyway, Trump said his administration has almost totally stopped drug trafficking by sea in Venezuela. Maybe. And even then, it's only a temporary success. It would require the US Navy to maintain naval assets for many more months. And the day the mission is over, small vessels are going to depart once again from Venezuela. But I have another question. Officially, 6 go-fast speedboats were sunk by US military forces. But we don't know how many got through. To me, that's the key information. Are you going to tell me that in 2 months, the Tren de Aragua cartel only dispatched 6 boats? Really? If that's really all they have to offer, is it really a threat then? Also on the 16th of October, The Guardian reported how 2 Trinidadians were believed to be on a boat Donald Trump alleged was carrying drugs from Venezuela to the US. I suppose that means that the strike happened near Trinidad. And this is where it gets extremely interesting. If we zoom in, Trinidad is located right next to Venezuela. The shortest distance between the two countries is 10 to 15 kilometers at most. Go-fast boats can cross this segment between 5 and 10 minutes. These trafficking operations are so lucrative that all the fishermen of the Sucre region have now become smugglers because it just pays more. And now you understand why Venezuela really didn't want US forces to deploy in Trinidad. Not only can it be used as a springboard to attack Venezuela, but it will also bring all this trafficking to zero. So if it's unlikely that this large US military buildup in the Caribbean will entirely stop drug trafficking in the region, it can perhaps lower traffic going through Venezuela, and thus temporarily cut profit margins for the cartel of the Suns. Emphasis on temporary. However, it's also very important to note that there's many routes for these drugs to travel. There's an entire corridor flowing through Colombia, linking Venezuela to the department of Choco in Colombia. There's also many routes through the Amazon, through Brazil, through Guyana. Remember the ELN cartel I mentioned earlier? Well, on this map, we can witness their expansion eastwards into Venezuela. Aerial, land, and naval routes going in all directions. And here comes the plot twist. On this map, by Inside Crime, we can see that the Cuyuni River is one of the main logistical hubs for narcotics. And surprise, surprise, this is where the Venezuelan military built its new base, right next to the settlement of San Martin de Turumbang. Here's this remote village of the Amazon, and here's the new military base. It's as if the Venezuelan military wanted to reassert control over cartels operating in the region, using the pretext of an action against Guyana. I don't know, it's just speculation, but it could be. So as you can see, it's very complicated. Anyway, Trump claimed he stopped drug trafficking by sea, and then said now we'll stop it by land. Good luck. So I repeat, if ground operations against Venezuela seem very unlikely to me, in typical gunboat diplomacy, US forces could conduct air or missile strikes against Venezuela. After all, it's the typical Trump trademark. As a historical reminder, April 2017, Tomahawk strikes against an airbase in Syria. January 2020, strike on Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. June 2025, bombing of the Fordo uranium enrichment plant in Iran. US forces could target drug production sites, warehouses, cartel leaders. But is this going to defeat drug trafficking in Venezuela? Probably not. But here's an important question. How will the armed forces of Venezuela react? They might defend their airspace. So the US military might also take this golden opportunity to wipe out the Venezuelan Air Force, the F-16s, the Su-30s, but also the entire Venezuelan Navy, especially the Iranian-made missile boats, as well as the Iranian drone production sites. On one hand, it's a major escalation. On the other, it leaves Maduro's regime naked, stripped of its air and naval assets, and exposed to US gunboat diplomacy. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.